Aravi Deshmukh and Charles Wallace seemed worlds apart, a young bride full of dreams and a powerful father of the groom hiding a dark, forbidden secret, but their past would collide in a deadly storm that left 14 people dead on what was supposed to be the happiest night of their lives. The wedding between Aravi Deshmukh and Kiran Wallace was announced as a celebration that would unite two families from different worlds. Preparations began months in advance, with both sides excited about the cultural union. Aravi's parents proudly shared the news with relatives, believing they had found the perfect groom for their only daughter. The Wallace family, known in Canada for their business achievements, expressed equal enthusiasm. Everything seemed ideal from the outside, making the upcoming wedding a topic of admiration in both Pune and Toronto. But beneath the surface, Aravi carried a quiet uneasiness she kept hidden from everyone. She appeared calm during ceremonies, but her mind rarely matched the smile on her face. She avoided staying long at pre-wedding events, often leaving early under the excuse of headaches. Relatives assumed she was tired, unaware of the deeper fear shaping her behavior. Kiran, warm and cheerful, tried his best to involve her in every ritual, but she maintained a gentle distance. She responded politely but kept emotional space between them. What looked like shyness to the families was actually her attempt to suppress a storm that threatened to return. As the guest list grew, decorations filled the house, and wedding outfits arrived from designers. Aravi felt trapped inside her own future. She sensed she was walking into something she couldn't escape, yet she had no way to explain her discomfort without tearing apart her family's joy. Every passing day increased her anxiety. She felt watched, as if someone from her past might reappear at any moment. The wedding that everyone praised as perfect felt to her like a door slowly closing behind her, locking her into a fate she didn't want but couldn't avoid. Kiran's father, Charles Wallace, arrived in India 2 weeks before the wedding, carrying an air of confidence that immediately drew attention. He was a man who looked like he belonged in boardrooms and luxury hotels, not crowded family gatherings. His presence added prestige to the event, and relatives admired his calm, polished behavior. But behind his controlled expressions lived a complicated history that no one present could sense. Charles had a sharp way of observing people, and he scanned every room he entered with quiet intensity. When he first saw Aravi, he paused only for a second, yet that moment felt heavier than the noisy celebration around them. Aravi felt her chest tighten and quickly moved away, pretending to busy herself with guests. To others, it seemed like normal pre-wedding nervousness, but for her, his arrival marked the beginning of a storm she hoped would never return. Charles spent his days visiting the wedding venue, meeting old business partners in India, and reviewing arrangements as if he wanted total control of the environment. The Wallace family believed he was simply being helpful, unaware of the deeper motive behind his watchful attitude. His wife, Margot, noticed his unusual silence during family dinners. He often stepped out to take calls that he never explained. Even Kiran sensed a slight distance in his father's behavior, but he dismissed it as travel fatigue. Charles's movements became even more unpredictable as the wedding day approached. He often walked alone at night through the large garden of the Deshmukh home, lost in thoughts that darkened his expression. To those around him, he appeared composed, but inside, he carried a secret that tied him to the bride in ways no one could imagine. His return to India was not just for his son's wedding, it was the beginning of a dangerous shift that silently pulled everyone toward disaster. Months before the marriage between Aravi and Kiran was ever discussed, Aravi had lived a completely different life shaped by her internship at a luxury resort in Goa. She had joined the program hoping to gain experience in hospitality, escape her routine, and prepare for her future career. The resort attracted wealthy clients from around the world, and among them was Charles Wallace, who had arrived for a corporate conference. He carried a quiet charm that made him stand out from the usual guests. His interest in Aravi began subtly, growing from polite interactions into something far more personal. At the time, Aravi believed he was a lonely widower who traveled constantly and struggled with isolation. His stories painted him as a man craving connection, and her kindness made her vulnerable to his attention. Their meetings became more frequent, each one blurring the boundaries she thought she would never cross. She trusted his words, unaware that they were carefully crafted to draw her deeper into his life. The truth surfaced unexpectedly when Aravi discovered his real identity through an article online that mentioned his family, his wife, and his adult son. Shock turned into a sinking feeling of betrayal. She realized she had been pulled into a situation built entirely on lies. The weight of guilt and fear pushed her to break everything off immediately. She resigned from her internship and left Goa without warning, hoping distance would erase her mistake. For weeks, she struggled with the shame of falling for a man who had hidden his family behind a polished mask. She never told her parents, convinced they would never understand. She promised herself never to see him again, believing the chapter was closed forever. But fate had other plans, silently waiting for the day when the past she buried would collide with the future her family chose for her. When Aravi learned that her parents had chosen a groom from a respected Canadian family, she tried to feel grateful. They were excited, proud, and unaware of the storm quietly building inside her. But the moment she saw the family photos sent to finalize the match, her world froze. Standing beside Kiran was the last person she ever wanted to face again, Charles Wallace. The same man whose lies had driven her out of Goa. The same man she had vowed to forget. Her heart sank, and her hands shook as she realized the horrifying truth. She was about to marry the son of the man who had deceived her. Aravi considered telling her parents the real reason she couldn't marry Kiran, but the consequences terrified her. She feared the shame it would bring, the questions she couldn't answer, and the heartbreak it would cause. With no proof that she had been manipulated and no courage to open old wounds, she stayed silent. Charles, however, acted as if nothing had ever happened. During the engagement ceremony, he greeted her politely, his expression calm and unreadable. His eyes held a strange familiarity that only she understood, a silent reminder that their past still existed beneath the surface. Each ritual felt like a trap tightening around her. She avoided standing near him, avoided being alone in any room where he might enter, and avoided meeting his gaze. But Charles seemed to study her quietly, as if waiting for her to break. He blended smoothly into family events, pretending to be nothing more than a supportive father of the groom. The contrast between his public behavior and their hidden history made Aravi feel helpless. Every moment brought a rising fear that he would reappear in her life in ways she couldn't control. With each passing day, the wedding felt less like a celebration and more like a countdown toward a truth she couldn't escape. Margot Wallace, known for her sharp intuition, sensed something unusual long before anyone else noticed. She had lived with Charles long enough to recognize even the smallest shifts in his behavior. In India, he seemed distracted, often staring into the distance as if trapped in old memories. He attended ceremonies but rarely participated with genuine interest. Instead of engaging with relatives or helping with preparations, he spent long hours alone, walking through the hallways of the Deshmukh home with a restless energy that unsettled her. His quietness, normally comforting, now felt heavy and secretive. Margot also observed the strange tension between Charles and Aravi. Each time they were in the same room, Aravi stepped away subtly, pretending to adjust decorations or speak to guests. Charles avoided unnecessary conversation, yet his eyes followed Aravi with a focus Margot had never seen before. She watched these small interactions unfold like pieces of a puzzle she did not yet understand. The uneasiness grew when she accidentally saw a bank alert on Charles's phone showing a large sum transferred to a private account she had never heard of. He brushed it off when she asked, offering vague explanations that only deepened her suspicion. During dinners, Charles barely ate and kept checking his phone. At night, he left their room claiming he needed fresh air, returning only after long periods of silence. Even Kiran noticed something off about his father, though he assumed stress from travel was the cause. Margot, however, knew it was more than that. She recognized the same signs she had seen years ago when Charles hid business troubles from the family. This time, the secrecy felt personal, almost dangerous. She sensed that something connected him directly to the bride, something powerful enough to disturb him on the eve of his own son's wedding. The feeling settled deep in her chest, a warning she couldn't explain, but couldn't ignore. Aravi tried to get through the remaining wedding rituals with a calm expression, but the pressure inside her grew heavier every day. She followed every instruction from her parents, posed for photographs, and greeted guests with a polite smile, yet her thoughts never stopped racing. She felt as if the past she had buried was beginning to rise around her, tightening its grip with each passing moment. The fear of Charles revealing their connection, or worse, trying to rekindle it, made her constantly alert. She avoided staying alone, but even in crowded rooms, she felt exposed. Her fears intensified when she discovered a small gift box placed near her bedroom door. Inside it lay a delicate silver pendant, the same one Charles had given her months ago in Goa. Seeing it again sent a cold shiver through her body. It was more than a reminder, it was a message. He was watching her closely, quietly slipping into her life despite her attempts to distance herself. She hid the pendant immediately, terrified that someone in her family might see it and begin asking questions she had no way to answer. Aravi became hyper-aware of every corner, every shadow, every unfamiliar sound in the house. She felt the walls closing in, convincing her that Charles would not allow her to move forward with Kieran. Every time he walked past her during an event, she felt him observing her, calculating something she could not understand. The calm expression he wore in public only made the threat more unnerving. She sensed that his silence was not neutral but a sign of something building beneath the surface. The closer the wedding came, the more she realized she was trapped in a situation where any wrong move could destroy multiple lives. What she had hoped was buried in the past had quietly returned, stronger and more dangerous than before. The wedding took place in a historic palace in Jaipur chosen for its beauty and grandeur, a place the families believed would create memories for a lifetime. As the sun set and the lights illuminated the courtyards, the atmosphere shifted into full celebration. Guests filled the hallways, dancers performed on the marble floors, and tables overflowed with food. Laughter echoed through every corner of the palace, masking the quiet tension buried inside the bride. Aravi tried to blend into the festivity, but her mind stayed alert, constantly scanning for any sign of Charles. She felt a strange heaviness in the air, a quiet warning she couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. While the main ceremony concluded smoothly, the night ahead was full of movement as guests roamed the palace's many sections. In one of the older wings, far from the music, a storage room held decorations, carpets, and crates for the following day's events. No one noticed when a faint chemical smell began spreading through the hallway near that room. At first, it blended with the scent of incense and flowers, easily dismissed by anyone passing by. But within minutes, the smell grew sharper, and a thin stream of smoke slipped from beneath the wooden door. The smoke thickened quickly, feeding on the dry fabrics and wooden beams stored inside. Because the palace was old, its ventilation carried the smoke into nearby corridors faster than anyone expected. Guests began coughing and looking around in confusion, unsure of the source. In the courtyard, people started rushing toward the exits as the fire alarm finally sounded, too late to stop the spreading flames. The elegant celebration instantly turned into panic. Decorations melted, curtains caught fire, and thick smoke filled the hallways, trapping people who had no idea which direction was safe. Chaos consumed the night as the fire raged uncontrollably, transforming a joyful wedding into a nightmare no one saw coming. When firefighters finally managed to break through the collapsing doors and smoke-filled hallways, the scale of the disaster became clear. The flames had spread through the oldest parts of the palace with frightening speed, feeding on years-old wooden beams, drapes, and stored materials. Entire sections of the building were reduced to blackened ruins before emergency teams could reach them. Guests who had been celebrating only moments earlier were now coughing outside, covered in ash, some crying, some searching desperately for missing family members. The once grand palace courtyard had turned into a place of panic, confusion, and grief. As the fire crews pushed deeper inside, they began discovering bodies in different corners of the burned wing. 14 people in total had lost their lives, including 2 decorators who had been preparing items for the next ceremony, a young receptionist from the palace staff, Kieran's close friend Liam who had gone exploring the old hallway out of curiosity, several elderly relatives unable to move quickly, and Margot's sister who had stepped away from the main event to rest in a quieter area. Their deaths formed a tragic pattern that showed how quickly the smoke and flames had overwhelmed anyone trapped inside. The police secured the area and began questioning witnesses. Many recalled smelling something unusual earlier or hearing a faint noise from the storage wing but had dismissed it amid the celebration. Investigators soon found burn patterns that didn't match an accidental fire. A melted metal canister containing traces of an accelerant lay near the remains of the storage shelves. This single discovery changed the entire direction of the investigation. The fire had not simply started, it had been created. As the news spread among guests, shock turned into uneasy suspicion. Families demanded answers, and whispers filled the courtyard as people wondered who would cause such destruction on a night meant for joy. The wedding Security footage from the palace was collected and reviewed through the night, with investigators searching for any clue that could explain the deliberate fire. Hours of video showed guests moving in and out of hallways, workers carrying decorations, and staff directing people toward the main events. Most of it appeared ordinary, until one segment captured a figure entering the old storage wing shortly before the fire began. The man moved with purpose, avoiding crowds and choosing a side entrance where no one would notice him. When investigators zoomed in and clarified the footage, the face became unmistakable. It was Charles Wallace. The discovery sent a wave of disbelief through the investigation team. The father of the groom had walked into the restricted area carrying a small container. Footage showed him locking the door behind him and reappearing minutes later, leaving quickly and adjusting his sleeves as if trying to hide traces of what he had done. There was no sign of panic or accident in his behavior. Instead, he moved with the calmness of someone executing a plan he had rehearsed in his mind. When confronted with the evidence, Charles initially tried to stay silent. Investigators found the same accelerant used in the fire inside a rental car he had hired days earlier. The receipt for the purchase of the chemical was traced back to a hardware store in Jaipur, recorded under an alias he had used during business trips. With every new piece of evidence, the truth tightened around him until denial became pointless. Eventually, Charles admitted he had set the fire. He claimed his intention had not been to kill but to create enough chaos to halt the wedding. He feared Aravi might reveal their past, destroying both his reputation and his son's future. In his mind, a temporary interruption seemed like the only way to keep everything contained. But the fire spread beyond his control, turning his reckless decision into a catastrophe that cost 14 lives. After Charles Wallace's arrest, the Wallace family and the Deshmukhs were left grappling with the aftermath of the tragedy. Kiran struggled to comprehend that his father, the man he had trusted most, had caused a disaster that destroyed lives and shattered celebrations. Devastated, he annulled the marriage and withdrew from the public eye, needing time to process the betrayal. Margot Wallace faced the painful realization that she had sensed the danger all along but could not prevent it. The weight of guilt and loss settled heavily on both families, leaving wounds that would never fully heal. Aravi returned to Pune, carrying the invisible scars of the wedding night. Though she had survived physically unharmed, she bore the burden of a past that had resurfaced with catastrophic consequences. She avoided speaking publicly about her relationship with Charles, knowing that revealing the truth would only invite judgment, shame, and more grief for families already traumatized. Instead, she focused on rebuilding her life quietly, seeking therapy and support from close friends who understood fragments of her story. The memory of the palace, the fire, and the 14 lives lost lingered in her mind like a shadow that refused to fade. The palace in Jaipur remained closed for years, a charred reminder of what had happened. Local authorities documented it as one of the most tragic incidents in modern Indian-Canadian wedding history. Safety regulations were reviewed, lessons were taken, but nothing could restore the lives that had been lost. Aravi learned to live with the knowledge that one hidden relationship, kept secret too long, could spiral into unimaginable destruction. The wedding that was meant to unite two families became a cautionary tale, proof of how love, deception, and obsession can collide with deadly consequences. The story of that night continued to haunt everyone involved, a chilling reminder that some secrets are never truly buried.